From the New York Times, it's The Headlines. I'm Tracy Mumford. Today's Wednesday, December 18th. Here's what we're covering. Today, the Federal Reserve is widely expected to cut interest rates, a sign that officials think their efforts to stabilize the U.S. economy have been working. But the question now is if that will continue.
After 5 years of supply chain disruptions and inflation and recession warnings, the economy has found a place of some stability. Yet the outlook for 2025 is as murky as ever. And there's really one reason for that, and it's Donald Trump.
My colleague Ben Castleman is covering the potential economic consequences of the policies that Donald Trump has been floating: tariffs, mass deportations, and tax cuts. He says the Fed will be watching to see which of those Trump follows through on, and so will investors.
A lot of investors on Wall Street are banking on a pretty rosy scenario. They expect Trump to focus on tax cuts and deregulation, things that would be good for corporate profits. But it's not at all clear that they're right about that. And I talked to economists who think it's much more likely that Trump will impose steep tariffs and start another trade war, that he will be more aggressive on immigration than Wall Street seems to be anticipating. And in a worst-case scenario, that could result in reduced investment, in a shortage of workers, and ultimately in higher prices and slower growth. None of that is remotely guaranteed, and the positive scenario remains very plausible. But that's kind of the point. The outlook for the future remains as uncertain as ever.
Meanwhile, along the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas, immigrant advocates are racing to help undocumented immigrants and their families prepare for the crackdown that Trump has promised. In southern Texas alone, there are thousands of people living without authorization. Many of them settled there years ago. They have children who are U.S. citizens and have largely not been targeted by authorities. But now, with Texas officials offering to help the Trump administration round people up, fear is spreading. One advocacy group is holding trainings, acting out possible scenarios to teach people how to respond if they're stopped for questioning. My colleague Edgar Sandoval recently sat in on one of those sessions.
The first sketch was basically designed to show them everything they could do wrong, right? For example, a man playing a police officer stops a woman. The woman playing the migrant basically divulges that she's lacking identification, that she doesn't have car insurance. And that was the first red flag, according to the activist. He said, when you do this, what you're really doing is giving the police permission to call for Border Patrol for backup because they have a suspected undocumented immigrant. So he did explain that they have a right not to answer questions, the right to call an immigration lawyer. And another important plan that they were told about was to secure power of attorney in case they get deported and the children stay behind. That way their children can be adopted by a legal relative instead of ended up in foster care. Even though they learned all this, there was still a lot of fear amongst the group. One man raised his hand and said, what if we just pack our bags and voluntarily go back home? You know, why are we waiting for us to be picked up one by one? That was his fear. But a lot of them walked away feeling at least that they can have some sort of plan.
Let me say a bit more about the charges. They include 1 count of murder in the first degree as a killing in furtherance of terrorism, 2 counts of murder in the second degree, 1...
The District Attorney of Manhattan announced yesterday that Luigi Mangione has been charged with first-degree murder in the killing of United Healthcare's CEO, and he classified Mangione's alleged actions as terrorism.
So, in its most basic terms, this was a killing that was intended to evoke terror. This was not an ordinary killing, not to suggest that any killing is ordinary, but this was extraordinary
Prosecutors are arguing that the brazen shooting on a Manhattan sidewalk in front of a busy hotel was intended to intimidate the public, therefore meriting the charge. If convicted, Mangione faces a life sentence without parole. He was also indicted on additional murder and weapons charges. He's set to appear in a Pennsylvania courtroom tomorrow for a hearing about his extradition to New York. The U.S. has a homeowners insurance crisis, and it's getting worse. As climate change has increased the risks of wildfires, flooding, storms, insurance companies have had to pay out, getting claim after claim from people whose homes have been damaged or destroyed. Facing major losses, some insurance companies have stopped renewing policies. Last year, Congress demanded that the country's largest insurance companies share data on where this is happening and how often. The congressional report is now out, and it shows that non-renewal rates have tripled in at least 200 counties across the country. There are the expected areas in California and Florida. Some insurance companies have pulled out of those states entirely. But the dropped policies have also become an issue along the Gulf Coast, in some of the Plains states, in the Mountain West, and all the way along the Atlantic coast, up to New England. There is a caveat. The data doesn't show why each policy wasn't renewed, so it can't be entirely attributed to climate threats. But areas deemed uninsurable can see property values plummet. That means less tax revenue for schools, police, and other basic services. And it's not just a problem for existing homeowners. If you can't get insurance, you can't get a mortgage. Without a mortgage, most Americans can't buy a home to begin with. You can see the full map of where homeowners have been dropped by insurance companies at nytimes.com. And finally,
nothing has cleared my skin until I saw a TikTok talking about beef tallow.
Today's hottest skincare trend is beef, specifically beef tallow, which is rendered fat from around a cow's internal organs.
I put beef tallow on, and it's almost like instant relief.
It's become the sought-after ingredient in cosmetics and for people who make their own skincare products at home.
I made this yesterday from a big package of ground beef that I got. I basically just cooked it down.
Users swear by it as a natural, organic moisturizer.
Guys, I don't know if I look glowy or greasy. I don't know how.
Not everyone is on the beef train, though, including several dermatology experts the Times spoke with. They warned that just because something's natural doesn't mean you should put it on your face. There's very little data about tallow as a skincare product, and it could cause acne or other irritation. Some farms and butchers are cashing in while the trend lasts, though. One ranch owner said she sold $42,000 in tallow products in just a few hours, using cow parts she used to throw away. This is, of course, not the first "you're putting what on your face" beauty phenomenon. The snail mucus trend, which is a thing, is still going strong. Those are the headlines. Today on The Daily, a look at the rape trial in France that has captivated the country for months and sparked a reckoning. A verdict is expected this week. That's next in the New York Times audio app, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Tracy Mumford. We'll be back tomorrow.